For the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item 2, public comments. Anybody wishing to address the council for something not on the agenda? Please step forward. Item 3, approval of the agenda.
Second.
Motion and second on the agenda. Any changes? All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion does carry. Item 4, consent agenda. Second. Motion and second on consent agenda. Any issues with this? All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion does carry. Item 5, public hearing. Remember this is Lori. Hey, Lori. Is she online?
Okay. Okay.
Okay,
I can take it then.
okay.
All right. So tonight what we would do is we would call, previously we've called for a public hearing. We did that on the May 6th city council meeting. So tonight we will have the public hearing, see if anybody has any comments on the assessment for putting this on the property tax. This is coming at the request of the property owner. So with that, I will take any questions. And we'll take any comment.
So that being said, we'll open the public hearing. Consider adopting the resolution 2024-31, adopting assessments for outstanding invoices. Anybody wishing to be heard about this, please step forward to the mic. See when no one come forward, we'll close the public hearing and then counselors look for action.
I'll move on adopting the delinquent account to be assessed.
Second. Motion and second, resolution 2024-31, adopting assessments for outstanding invoices. Any other questions or concerns? All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion does indeed carry. Item 6, right?
Great.
An event. Is that you, Caleb? Yeah. Okay.
So staff had received a request from Mitch Evans with St. Cloud Toyota regarding a 5K and a 1K run walk. The route is on this map here. So the blue dots indicate the 5K, the white dots indicate the 1K. The event would take place on September 14th of this year. And the street closure would actually just be a smaller portion of that. It would be, let me grab this map here. The actual closure would just be this portion of Baker Street, and that's the start and stop of the run. Mr. Evans has worked with Little Saints Academy for use of their parking lot and green space. So the 1K would take place on the city's land, which is to the west of Little Saints, or excuse me, east of Little Saints Future Community Center location. Event proceeds will go to the Indy Foundation, which is a foundation that raises money for people in our community that are currently on their cancer journey. Mitch is here this evening if you do have any questions for him.
I do.
Okay. All right, Mitch. Introduce yourself.
My name is Mitch Evans, work at St. Cloud Toyota. I'm being the event coordinator, if you will, for the 5K.
You have questions?
Have we had this event before?
Not exactly. No, it's kind of mirroring the Old Glory Run.
Yeah.
I've modified the route slightly as I've heard from a number of people that the Old Glory run was not exactly 5K. So the top right kind of corner of the map there, I've added that little bump out. And then the bottom portion of the Kleinfelter Park used to go around the other area there. But I've done this route something like a dozen times myself to confirm that this is in fact 5K now.
And then Mitch, how do you plan to staff it? I mean, how many people from your organization or from Toyota will be on site?
Mostly from Indy Foundation.
Yeah.
They've basically told me that there will be no staffing concerns. They have people that have been wanting desperately to do this event for a long time. They've just needed somebody else to kind of make it happen. So lots and lots of people from the Indy Foundation, very eager to contribute.
Yeah. And then I just want to thank you for bringing this to us far in advance.
Mhm.
We had a lot of
pleasure.
people petitioning to do this, close streets, do that. And they come at the last minute, you know, the ninth inning.
Yep.
And so thank you for
For sure.
looking forward and
Even this feels a little bit last minute for me. I feel like it's a lot to get going. Summer's gonna go quick, so.
that's all I had.
Okay. So I have one question. The vendor village kind of thing, are they
Yep.
coming through the parking lot? And is there gonna be any kind of, is that where the attendants will park in the Little Saints parking lot?
Vendors will be able to park in, so I've modified this a little bit since Little Saints is redoing their parking lot
Right.
shortly. So there's an area in there that I made green as is going to be their green space, and then their parking lot, I figure I'll close off their parking lot for vendor parking.
Okay,
They don't really want a ton of new traffic on that asphalt since it's going to be fresh and new this year and whatnot.
Okay.
So that will not be event parking, that will be vendor parking only.
so the people that are running and are parking on like Callaway and stuff?
Yeah,
Or just on street parking?
streets, yep.
Okay, okay.
yeah, I figure anybody that's used to doing an event in St. Joe is used to parking on the streets.
From a guy that ran the Old Glory, I don't really want it 5K. No, I don't. The under 5K was fine for me, but okay. So I don't have any issue with it. So that was my question. So you need a motion to move?
Yes, please.
So move, approve the street closure for this event location.
Seconded.
Motion and second, approving street closure for this event on this location. Any other questions or concerns? All those in favor signify by aye. Opposed, motion carries. Thank you very much. Outdoor patio. Is you Kayla or Neat or who?
Yeah, this is me.
Okay.
So, good evening, Mayor and councilors. If we can switch it over. Maybe not. There we go. Awesome. So for your consideration this evening, so staff's been working with the La Playette on their plans to reinstall an outdoor patio for their space. Couple depictions here. The one graphic to the left just kind of shows a rough outline of their property. And then the one to the right kind of is just showing that area that's blocked off for a proposed patio. Staff has worked with them and directed them to submit a permit, which staff would have to deny, and then to appeal that denial and receive a recommendation from the Planning Commission and Council. The reason for that denial is just there's a conflict with the code. Right now, the outdoor patio ordinance requires all the parking regulations and off-street spaces to be complied with. And given that there is spaces that will be blocked off as part of this proposal, there is that conflict with the code. You'll recall over the last 2 or 3 years, really since COVID, there was some leniency given for outdoor patio spaces, and that leniency just kind of continued. Since the patio was removed and proposed to be reinstalled, we need direction in regards to the permit appeal itself. Just some details in regards to the parking spaces and off-street spaces. There's 23 total spaces right now within the property. Enclosing the patio would result in a loss of 8 spaces. However, they would gain 3 more spaces on the north side of the enclosed patio area. There's also a couple of spaces that are on the north side of the building that are taken up by a couple garbage receptacles. So the total spaces that would be left after the patio is there is a total of 16 spaces. It should be noted too that the La Playette building, like many of our downtown buildings, you know, this was constructed in the 1950s, so does predate a lot of our ordinances and regulations, including our off-street parking. Also of note, a tenant to the south, Talkaholics, currently has a private easement agreement with the La Playette. That easement requires a 4-foot right-of-way access to the back of their facility, which would be maintained throughout the duration of the patio. The La Playette is also, just a side note, is also working to look at doing a more permanent setup and arrangement that would have to come forward at a later time. So the request right now is a approval on the permit denial. And they are intending to put up that patio from May until October. The planning commission did vote on this for approval, 5 to 0. And also it should be noted that, if we do receive more requests like this, that, it may be worthwhile to reevaluate ordinances and such, potentially, if this is approved this evening. So the ask is that the Lafayette is asking this evening is to approve the permit appeal and allow them to have that patio space from May to October of this year. With that, I'd be happy to answer questions.
Counselors? So I'll make a motion to, on the permit appeal.
I second that.
Motion and second, permit appeal for the patio. Other questions or concerns? All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Oh. Nay. Motion prevails 4-1. Zoning. That you too, Nate?
Yes. All right. So the next item up for consideration is a zoning text amendment. So over the past few months, staff has been working with Tyler Bregelman on his plans to develop 2 lots out in our industrial park off of 21st Avenue Northeast. His plan includes a total of 7 structures, which would be done in a couple of different phases. The request and why this is coming forward is Mr. Bregelman plans to lease out these different buildings to multiple different tenants. So we have a conflict with our code where our code requires that there should be no more than 1 principal structure, 1 principal building per lot. So over the course of a few months, as we worked with Tyler on his request, there was options that were presented to him, including 1, combining the structures into 1 contiguous building, 2, to replat the lot into what we call a CIC plat. So that's a common interest community plat. Those are common when you see like a commercial business strip mall where you have multiple tenants and multiple spaces with a tenant in its own space and its own parcel, then you can essentially sell those spaces individually. So that was the second option. And then the third option, and why we're here this evening, is a text amendment. So Mr. Bregelman did submit that text amendment application. Essentially what that text amendment, as we have it written right now, is we would add language that states that there should be no more than 1 principal building in single-family residential districts. So that essentially would allow or open up the possibility to have more than 1 principal building in our industrial district, which is where Mr. Bregelman is looking at those 2 lots at. So we did work with him on this language change and did review it also with legal, as well as the options that were presented to him. So with that, what is being requested tonight is that change in the ordinance for resolution 2024-002 and then the subsequent summary publication. And the applicant is in attendance this evening as well, in case there are questions.
Counselor?
You said strip mall, like a strip mall. Is that what this is intended for?
No, so again, the reason why Mr. Bregelman cannot proceed forward without pursuing one of those 3 options that I outlined is because the intent is that each of those buildings are leased out and used by a separate user. So they're essentially what we call principal structures. And the code doesn't currently allow that. The example I was referencing earlier in terms of strip malls was one of the options is a replat into a common interest community. And those often you'll see maybe a contiguous building, but they're leased out individually. And then they can be partitioned in their own parcels, IDs. So that gives the ability to sell and lease those different individual spaces to different users.
So I have a question. Is Mr. Braverman here?
Yes,
Tyler,
he is. Yep.
So you own these two lots?
Correct.
And on this lot we're looking at on the north with the green on it, you want to build 3 buildings
Yep.
and then lease those to separate businesses.
Correct.
So I'm in favor of moving forward with this, Nate, but you would not be able to sell one of those 2-3 to an entity. It's just a lease arrangement,
Yep,
correct?
Then if I chose that I wanted to sell them, I'd have to sell it all together.
Yeah,
Yeah, so just to add to that too, you'd either have to, sell the lot as one, or
Right.
you'd have to come back to the council and do a CIC plat and put each of those buildings on its own parcel ID.
sure. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know why our code is written this way. This is kind of like a no-brainer, right? The applicant owns the lot, wants to build 3 buildings and wants to lease 1, 2, and 3 to 3 different entities. So-
Yeah, the only difference is that, you'll see in our industrial park that there are multiple structures that are lots that have multiple buildings,
Yeah.
but they're accessory to the principal building. So the only difference is that Mr. Brigham will have primary users in each of those 7 buildings that will be different and not tied or accessory to one another. So
And so I say, so what?
Well,
there you go.
It's like a technicality and like vernacular. It's like primary versus accessory.
This
And,
isn't in
the-
like a residential area. It's in the industrial park.
In the photo on the left where it shows like the aerial, there's all kinds of buildings on individual lots, but as Nate was mentioning, like they're the set.
Tied into a main one.
Well, and so it looks like building 4 is like right on the line, so that have we okayed that to make that?
has to be.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll clarify that. So his first phase, Mr. Brigelman, includes constructing 2, maybe 3 buildings on the north side of that northern lot. If he comes back and does the middle building and the buildings on the south, there's a couple steps. You'd have to, 1, consolidate the lots into 1, which we can handle administratively. And then 2, he'd have to vacate the interior easements that run between those 2 lots, which would come back to the council and the planning commission with public hearing.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Brigham, do you have people in mind ready to lease once you're done building, or
I
is it
only have,
pure spec?
I only have one person interested, and that's my dad. Other than that, I haven't advertised or anything yet. I was kind of just seeing if I could move forward with everything first.
And these buildings are gonna be what, like big pole barns, or are you gonna have, what's gonna be inside of them, just open space that a lessor would be able to, or lessee would be able to configure to their own needs?
Yeah, so it'll just be a big pole barn with an office and a bathroom in it for any sort of small business or whatever anyone would need in there.
And do you have a business in the industrial park?
I do not know.
You just own this lot? You own these 2 lots?
Yep.
Okay. And your background is?
I work for a mechanical contractor out of Wake Park. My dad is the owner of that,
Okay,
so I've only worked for him for a few years, but yeah, I live over by Kennedy School. I've lived in St. Joe for, I don't know, 10 years now, so.
thank you. I don't have any other questions.
So this change doesn't restrict what kind of businesses can go in here, does it? Doesn't say it has to be pole barn, empty space and an office and a bathroom. It can be anything.
Yeah, so he'd have to meet all of our other standards in our zoning code, including materials, heights, site specifics, impervious surface.
And I say that
Yep.
because if somebody wanted to ask or build a business out here that was appliance related, selling appliances, that would not necessarily be a pole barn where you'd have customers coming and going, just like Granite City Gymnastics or something of that nature. How do we know what parking requirements will be without knowing what's going in there? Or any of the other requirements for that matter?
Yeah, so that's part of
Or-
the zoning element that we'd work with Mr. Bregelman on as part of the review for site plan and that.
So if
Which
somebody
we're going
comes to
through.
him and says, I want to build an appliance rental center or something, or a Geyer rental kind of thing. And, I mean, how would that work? I mean, how would that
Yeah,
kind of
so
work then?
yeah, so I mean, we wouldn't issue any of the permits and if the use is not compatible with our zoning ordinance.
Well,
So
Would that be a use of? I mean, would that, if you want to put in a Geyer rental out there, would that be a zoning ordinance or use?
an industrial park, I think we do allow that, but there's gonna be restrictions tied to the outside storage. So outside storage, you'd have to get a CUP likely.
So my guess is that not everybody that's gonna come in here is gonna want a pole barn lease space, office and a bathroom. There could be other uses that could potentially be used, and I want to know how we manage that
Mhm.
without getting it out of hand. How does that happen?
During the review of the project at site plan or building permit.
Okay.
Yep.
So
And if there's a spec building that's built, when they come back and that we've made adjustments in SAC and WAC calculations, for instance,
okay,
before they can occupy that space.
and so that was another question. How to do utilities? How do you manage 7 buildings on 2 lots or whatever it is? Or SAC and WAC and that calculation?
Yeah, so that
How
would
do you
be,
do that?
yeah, so SAC and WAC would be calculated on the individual buildings themselves. So we'd come in for a permit for each of those buildings, and then we calculate the SAC and WAC per the space that is proposed to be built in within that building.
Okay. So you could get 3 buildings in here and then another building wouldn't be able to fit based on its use. Maybe, just based on the new use of a building. If I wanted to build another
confused
if
by-
I want to put another Granite City Gymnastics out here, the calculation would say I can't put it out there. That may force it not to be put out there, built in this place.
The calculation of SAC and
SAC and
WAC.
yeah.
I don't think SAC and WAC would necessarily deny. I think it would depend on the more or less the size of the structure, the total green space, the total impervious surfaces, all of our kind of site characteristics that we look at. So you or anyone would have to still comply with all of those specs, including, I mean, paving of the parking lot, parking spaces. So those parking spaces would be calculated based on those individual buildings, the uses, and then what is, you know, in the interior of those spaces.
So for a layman's term here is,
I didn't think.
he's doing the shell. Okay, so he's setting up the shell, he's making sure everything is set, and then let's say a hairdresser or one of the companies that came in, a knick-knack shop. Would they have to go through him to set that, or would they have to go through you to set that perimeter of that use?
In the best scenario, I think that they would, you know, work with him, but then before approvals could occur, they would come to the city,
Okay.
which then we would have to approve based on the permitted or non-permitted uses in the zoning.
So Tyler, under the best scenario, you'd be looking at like 7 pole buildings and leasing them out.
Correct.
But it could be like 3 pole buildings and nobody else comes out. Right?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Okay, I've answered all my questions.
I'd like to move on ordinance resolution 2024-002 to approve the proposed zoning amendment.
Second.
Motion and second, 2024-02, approving the zoning amendment. One more question. We restrict this to just industrial? Or
So the way that we wrote the modified language to the code is we just specified single family districts. So it could apply to to different districts.
So you
guess-
could do this in commercial districts, on business highway districts.
Potentially.
So.
But I would say that when staff works with applicants in that, you know, we direct them and try to go down pathways that are most suitable to the use.
And I get it,
Yeah.
but you know, one of the things the Minnesota State Legislature tried to do is this middle housing thing where they put multiple buildings on a single lot. And it was primarily residential, but it could be anywhere. And so I'm not sure that we shouldn't just say industrial lots at this point. And limit it to industrial until, you know, commercial, business, highway, everything else
Mhm.
falls in line.
Yeah, we're opening it up to retail or.
Well, I just,
you know, that creates traffic.
I understand, I mean, I understand Tyler's concept, I really do. I just think that if you open the gate, it could be, end up being multiple places along business highway district, multiple units, multiple whatever.
Mm.
And that concerns me. So, well, anyway, there's a motion and second, but I think, well, my motion is to table until we can restrict this to just industrial parks. Or just industrial lots. Come back with language that says, this is the only place we can have it right now. And, you know, it could go back next meeting, I would assume, but
Mhm.
to me,
Yeah.
I just having the ability to build primary structures in multiple lots across commercial and highway business and everywhere else is concerning them.
Mhm.
So my motion is to table until we can come back with better language.
But there's already a motion. There's already a motion and a second to approve this. Can you just switch a motion to table?
Well, I'm not sure. I think.
If I may.
Thank you.
If you get, if you get a second.
Yeah, if I may, yeah, so
Yeah.
if there's a motion and a second on the table, somebody can make a motion to table it. It does require a second.
Second.
And then, once the motion is seconded, then typically, a motion to table is not subject to debate. They just get to vote on it. So
So Bob seconded, motion seconded table. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Motion prevails 3-2. Thank you, Tyler. They'll be in touch with you. Item 9. Item 9. Nate, you're on. board again.
Awesome. Yes. Keeping them to one slide tonight. So, so for your consideration this evening, Adam Hansen, owner of Hansen Companies, is proposing to construct a new 82,500 square foot manufacturing facility, which also contains about 6,000 square feet of office space. This is located off Jasmine Court and 21st Avenue Northeast. Parcels will be consolidated into one contiguous lot as part of this development. So being proposed is what Hansen is requesting is a variance to the parking lot materials. You can see in this graphic here, essentially those areas in purple are proposed to be a crushed granite or asphalt surface. The areas in yellow will all be paved with asphalt and curb and guttered. We have seen similar requests to this in the past in regards to variances for the parking lot materials. Of course, as with any variance though, each one should be evaluated on its own unique characteristics. So we have proposed or prepared a finding of fact for both a approval on the variance, and there's also a finding of fact that would be in denial. The Planning Commission did hold a public hearing on this. We did not have anyone speak and we did not have any written comments that were received. And the commission did vote to approve the variance request 5-0. So the first motion that's being requested, an action that's being requested is for the variance resolution 2024-032, which approves the variance proposal. And I'd be happy to answer questions. Applicant is also in attendance.
Bob.
Yeah, what's the green area that's got lines in there for parking?
Yeah, so the green area is kind of part of what I'll highlight. Hanson's also requesting a proof of parking. So in yellow is what he is going to be proposing to construct immediately in coordination with the building itself. The area in green is future parking spaces that would be constructed but would not be constructed at the time of the building construction.
Okay, so how is this building laid out? Is it,
Yeah, so looking straight up towards the cul-de-sac would be looking east. Where that yellow is facing north.
that's the frontage, that's the entrance of that area.
Correct. Yep. So the area in purple would be in the rear of the facility. There'd be portions that would be visible from 21st Avenue, being the south side of the entranceway where you kind of see that little bit of yellow on that south entrance going towards the south of the building, into the rear of the facility. So portions of that would be visible from the right of way, but the rest would be pretty screened for the most part by the building itself.
And the backside of that building faces what?
133.
Yep, portions of
133.
133. I'll pull up an aerial. So essentially the building will be in this area right here. So there is a neighbor property here
Got it.
that does have,
Nice green. fence.
yeah, some fence there. But the road is higher than the fence.
Okay, I'm fine.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I move to approve the variance resolution for 2024-032.
Motion seconds, variance resolution 2024-32. Other questions or concerns? All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
I also move to approve the proposed proof of parking plan.
Second.
Motion and second to approve proof of parking plan. Any other questions? All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed, we are approved. Okay, what's next? Oh, good, we got an audit. Item. Yeah, we like audits, we do. Yeah, you're on now.
Hi. We have Janelle Bitson from Bergen KDV that's here to present the results of our financial audit for 2023.
I'm with Bergen KDV, here to present the results of your 2023 audit. The first thing I wanted to cover tonight is the reports that we issue as part of the audit process. The first one being the independent auditor's report. This report does discuss that the financial statements themselves are management's responsibility, and that's where you're relying on your staff to compile the information for the statements themselves as well as the footnote disclosures. And then our responsibility is to issue an opinion based on the results of our testing. We did issue an unmodified opinion, which is considered a clean opinion or the best opinion that you can receive on your financial statements. It states that your statements present fairly in all material respects. The next report we issue is our report on in accordance with government auditing standards. These standards require us to look at the internal controls over financial reporting, as well as compliance with various laws, regulations, contracts, and grants. We had one internal control finding to report, and that's the lack of segregation of accounting duties. You've seen this in the past just due to the limited staff that you have within the finance department. Very common finding for cities of your size. So we just recommend that as a council, you remain aware that situation does exist and continue your oversight through reviews of reports that you're receiving. And then when it comes to compliance, we had no instances of non-compliance to report. And then the last report we issue is the report on Minnesota legal compliance. Each year, the state auditor's office gives us a list of state statutes to test compliance with. And we had no instances of non-compliance, so a clean report there for the city. And then following that, we've got some charts and graphs that show some kind of financial analysis, historical trends for the city. The first one here shows your tax capacity, levy and rates for the last 5 years. As you can see in the graph here that your tax rate and levy have been increasing in each of the years presented. The tax capacity is increasing at a higher rate than your levy, so that has resulted in a decrease in your overall tax rate for the city. And then this graph also shows your collection rate for property taxes, and you continue to have a high rate of collections within the city. Following that is a graph that shows the different components of your general fund balance. For 2023, you did see an increase in fund balance of about $591,000. And then the different colors on the graph break out the different components. So there are some dollars that are considered non-spendable for items that have already been paid for, so those dollars are already spent. You've got dollars that are restricted for PEG access and public safety. And then you've also got about $2.1 million assigned for specific purposes, things like elections, severance payments, and capital outlay. And then the green is the non-spendable category, just under $2.2 million for unassigned category. And that represents about 5 months worth of expenditures for the city. Your policy is to have 4 to 6 months worth of expenditures in that unassigned category. So right in line with the policy that the council has set for the city. The next graph summarizes total revenues, expenditures, and fund balance for the city for the last 5 years. For 2023, you did see an increase in both revenues and expenditures, and we'll kind of go through the details of those in some of the following graphs. Overall, revenues did exceed expenditures, so that was attributed to the growth that you saw within your fund balance, as talked about on the prior page. In total, your fund balance has grown about $2 million in the 5 years presented here. And then the next table summarizes the general fund revenues. In total, they increased about $1 million from the prior year. You saw increases in the tax levy, increases in licenses and permits with increase in building activity. Intergovernmental revenues increased with a new public safety aid, and then also some recognition of some ARPA funds this year. And then your miscellaneous revenues also increased. Most of that was attributed to increases in investment income with a change in the market rates for the year. And then following that, we've got some pie charts that show the different components of revenue as a percentage of the whole. So you can see 2023 compared to 2022. Overall, fairly consistent on the percentages of where those dollars are coming from. Taxes and intergovernmental revenues continue to be the largest components of your revenue sources for the general fund. Those two categories together make up about 81% of your total revenues for the general fund. The next table is the general fund expenditures. Expenditures increased about $594,000 or 13% for 2023. You did see increases kind of across the board when it relates to salaries and benefits with some changes in the compensation structure. You also had some additional employees in the public safety area. And then professional services and park improvements also were some of the increases in the expenditures. And then the pie charts on the next page break out the different programs of expenditures as a percentage of the whole. Public safety, again, continues to be the largest component of where you're spending your dollars in the general fund, about 39%. And that includes fire, police, public or building inspections and so. The next table shows your general fund budget to actual results. As a council, you approved a budget for kind of a directive to management of where you anticipated the general fund balance should come out. And that's the first column of numbers, which called for a decrease in fund balance of about $102,000. The actual results are in that second column, which was the increase of about $591,000. So overall, you outperformed the budget itself. A couple of variances going into that. Your revenues were about $1 million over budget. A few of the larger areas in that were the license and permits, with development being higher than what you had budgeted for. The intergovernmental revenues was about half of that variance. You did receive a new public safety aid during 2023 that was not budgeted for. And then also using some of the federal ARPA dollars, which were also not included in the budget. And then the miscellaneous revenues were over budget, and again, that related to the investment income. You've historically budget conservatively for that, without knowing what the rates and such are gonna be. And then on the expenditure side, you were about $440,000 over budget. The largest item in that was the culture and recreation line. You did have some building improvements and other park improvements during the year that were not budgeted for, some of them related to storm damages and repairs that were done. So that kind of makes up the largest variance on the expenditure side. So again, total fund balance increased about $591,000, so about $693,000 better than you had anticipated that fund would come out. And then following that, we've got a few graphs on your enterprise funds. The first one here being the water fund. This fund did have operating income in each of the 5 years presented here. For 2023, you did see an increase in operating revenue due to an increase in usage and an increase in rates. Your operating expenses increased with increases in wages, meter replacements, and repairs and maintenance. So again, an operating income for 2023 of about $109,000. So you are fully covering depreciation in this fund, and that kind of helps you set aside dollars for future repairs and replacements costs. Similar story on the next page, the sewer fund. You did see an operating income in each of the years presented in this fund as well. For 2023, that was about $319,000. This fund also saw an increase in operating income with increases in fees and usage. And then your operating expenses stayed relatively consistent with the prior year. The refuse fund is on the next graph. This fund showed an operating income for the first time in the 5 years presented. $24,000 operating income. You saw an increase in rates and customers, so your operating revenues increased about 47,000 or 12%. And then operating expenses increased about $17,000 with increases in fees from the waste collection company. So again, the operating income of about $24,000. The next slide is, or page is the stormwater fund. This fund did have an operating loss for the year. Expenses did exceed revenues. The prior year was the only year in the 5 years presented here that you had an operating income. And most of that was attributed to a developer fee that you had received in the prior year relating to a development. So your revenues were higher in 2022. Your operating expenses for this year increased with increased engineering fees and depreciation. And then again, the operating loss, about $27,000. Without factoring in depreciation, you did have an operating income of about $139,000. So you're about 84% of your depreciation was covered within that fund. And then the last one is the street utility fund. This fund also had operating income in each of the years presented. Operating revenue was relatively consistent with the prior year. You did see some increase in the operating expense with increase in the street light repairs. And then an overall operating income of about $11,000. So that's what I've had prepared for you tonight, kind of a quick summary of 2023. Certainly open to any questions, if any of you have any questions on what I covered tonight or the documents you received as part of your council packets.
Counselor?
The very first graphic you showed us that displayed our fire fund in 2019 and 2020. It disappears every year after that. Was it recategorized?
Good question.
It was a bar graph, the very first one. Yeah,
Yeah, this one.
so the signed fire fund disappears after 2020. So I'm hoping it was recategorized.
We moved the fire fund into a special revenue fund, so it was pulled out of the general
Yeah, I know
fund.
there's a reason, but I can't remember that far back. I was just looking to see if there was a separate fund.
We moved the fire fund into as a special revenue fund. Can anybody hear me?
There is a fire service fund in the special revenue funds. So I think it was put into that fund, so it's its own fund now. It used to be reported as part of the general fund. And now those dollars are set aside, so you have the general fund is your main operating fund, and then you've got a whole slew of other funds that are, you know, your debt service and capital project funds, and then there's one that's fire service. And that has $569,000 in it, and those dollars are set aside specifically for fire related items.
Okay, so for accounting purposes, it's kind of been relabeled or recategorized.
Yeah, it's, moved to another fund, so it's still there, it's just in a different place.
That's all I wanted to know.
Good.
So, may I?
Yeah, go ahead.
So as we're on this, slide, the green basically represents the rainy day money.
Yeah.
If for some reason we didn't have revenue, there's 5 months of reserves in the green bar to pay our expenses. That's how Lori's described it to me.
Yeah, so for whatever reason, you know, you've got dollars that are budgeted for permits and stuff. If development all of a sudden stopped and you wouldn't have those revenues coming in, you'd be able to spend down some of these unassigned dollars, or if the state for whatever reason took away your LGA dollars, you know, they can, there's different areas that kind of help you make up for some of it.
And that number on one of these slides about intergovernmental in the pie chart's a big number.
Yep.
That's LGA primarily.
It's LGA. In there is also
Like
there's a
COVID
public
stuff.
safety aid that you received in 2023. That's
Like
kind
the-
of a one-time thing.
Yeah, okay.
You have some ARPA funds in there that
Right.
were the federal COVID dollars. You're not gonna be receiving any more of those. So some of those dollars are gonna be going away.
Okay.
You're not gonna have those every year.
And if I may, just elaborate on there, the one time I did in my career where I did see where we did use some of the reserve fund is forget the year of it, when LGA was frozen, and the governor did that, and we had to use that for a while. So probably the scenario where I see it happen the most is if LGA would be frozen or held up or something along those lines. We do have that to use until the legislature and governor agree on something.
Yeah, and then on the opposite side too, sometimes you have unexpected expenditures come up if there's you know, the years that you had bad weather, there's excessive snow removal costs, or if something would happen to the building and you have to make repairs to City Hall or whatnot, then there's dollars aside to make those payments.
Tornado come through would help, it could help clean up.
Yep.
Stuff like that.
So then on page 17 of your report, page 111 on the PDF, that's the water fund? Are those the revenues that we get for sending out water bills?
Yeah.
Yes.
Utility bills, yes.
It's called enterprise funds.
And
All supporting.
we're increasing, I heard from a constituent this morning complaining to me about their water bill going up. Are we increasing our water rates for?
Yes, we are. We approved that.
We hadn't changed it in 20 years, isn't that correct?
Right.
I don't get a water bill, I'm on a well, so.
Water rates have been being changed for the
Yeah.
last decade, every
Yeah.
year.
Our water rates are consistently based on.
Yeah, it's all based
the
upon
Study we did like 4 or 5 years
profit and
ago.
loss.
Right.
And then on page 18 of the report, page 112 on the PDF, the sanitary sewer fund. We got some payments, Janelle, from Foley. They were paying us, and I don't know if that flows through this, or if that was to pay down debt. Because Foley was paying us to buy into the St. Cloud system.
And
You-
that actually hasn't been recognized yet. That's not reflected in these statements. Because
Because,
they are not, as of the end of 23, they were not hooked up to the system yet.
oh, okay.
So in 2024, that transaction will flow through your financials. It won't necessarily, like what you're seeing in this chart is more operational. So
Yeah.
it's like what you're charging the users, what you're paying to run the system. And that's more of a non-operating thing. So you've got an asset on your book right now for capacity, even though it's part of St. Cloud's system. We show that as a capital asset to the city. And then there's debt related to that. So in 2024, part of that asset will
Right.
go away and then part of that debt will go away as
Okay.
well.
And then when your company audits, how many people are here on site auditing? Typically.
I think we had 4 members that were working on the audit this year. Some were on site, some were remote, but they're your staff have everything electronic and stuff so that we're able to kind of.
And then as part of the audit, I mean, besides just looking at spreadsheets that Lori and her department provide you, you say you want to look at this and they provide it, right? Do you do any forensic type stuff? Like we have city issued credit cards? Yes?
We do.
And
we
people
do
use
look
them.
at-
I mean, how do you, is there any part of your process that would say, oh, this staff member is potentially abusing a credit card?
We do look at some disbursements, and that does include credit card payments and such. We do not look at every transaction, so just be aware of that. So
Yeah, there'd be a lot to look at.
yeah. So we do random stuff
sampling?
like that. Yep, sampling, and every year we come up with what we call an unpredictable test. So there's a lot of things, like sewer revenues and stuff, we do a recalculation that the revenues are based on the usage, that revenues appear reasonable or what we would expect them to come out at. But then we also throw in some tests that staff don't know we're gonna do every year, so that there's something new and kind of throw them off guard. We talk to different people in different departments. Things like that. So it's not always just the finance people.
Thank you.
Anything else? We need a motion to accept it, correct?
I move to approve.
Second.
Motion and second to approve 2023 audited financial statements. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Very good. Thank you, Janelle.
Thank you.
Blah, 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 blah. 11. What I said, 11.
Good evening, council.
Engineer.
Good evening. In your packet this evening, for your consideration are 2 resolutions. So we have advanced the 2024 street improvement project to a point now where the council has the next step, which is to declare the cost to be specially assessed and to schedule the public special assessment hearing. And so those 2 resolutions are the next step in the chapter 429 process. So I'll pause there and see if the council has questions first regarding the 2 resolutions.
Not me.
Last Monday, we actually opened bids for the 2024 street improvements. So I can canvass those if you're interested. Long story short, the low bids came under the engineer's estimates, so the city received favorable bids. And so the cost that you see in the resolution declaring cost to be assessed reflects the low bid amount. City has also received its special assessment benefit report, which you have commissioned since 2014, I think, with each public improvement. So the assessment caps that you'll see in the draft assessment rolls, likely at the next meeting, would reflect the feedback that the city received from its special benefit analysis.
I'll move on resolution 2024-27 and also resolution 2024-28.
Second.
So one at a time, motion and second, 2024-27, declaring cost to be assessed and ordering prep of proposed assessments. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
And motion and second on 2024-28, calling and ordering notice to begin for affected property owners of special assessment hearing. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Brendan, do we have to announce the?
You don't have to.
Notices?
Nope.
Okay, very good. Anything else?
So just one other update. I reached out to Stearns County just to check on the status with respect to County Road 75 bridge improvements. Sounds like things are still on schedule. They're still hoping for early June in terms of that being open. So I don't have a final date other than we're getting close to early to mid-June. But
Is the road work that would be started once that opens on County Road 133 still on schedule to start?
so it's not, so the county has not received plan approval. So that project has not been, the County Road 133 turn lanes and roundabout. That project has not been bid yet. So that is not scheduled, at least imminently, to start after the bridge project. So consequently, at least with the costs that were accounted for in that resolution, we anticipated that we may not be in sync with those Elm Street improvements. So we're working still with engineers' estimates on the Elm Street costs. And then those would be, like you've done in the past, if costs come in materially lower than what you've levied assessments for, if they're materially different, the city has made adjustments, but we're still working with the engineering estimates at this stage.
Okay, thank you.
So Randy, so they've been doing all the stakes and surveying and putting up the flags where all the utilities are on Elm and 133. So they're assuming it's gonna be done sometime.
Yes, the county's still anticipating the project's gonna proceed this summer. The
Okay.
private utility companies, there's been coordination going on with utility relocations. So the flags that you're seeing are more in response to the private utility companies getting their infrastructure organized and ready to move.
And the only reason I bring that up is because when they see that, they start calling, when's it gonna start, kind of thing. And
Yep.
that's, so good answer.
So very similar to your own projects, even before we'll start at least a
Yeah.
reconstruction project, you'll see the flags, and usually it's the gas companies, the power companies starting to have their infrastructure moved out of the way. So that's what people will likely see first before any detours and road closures.
Anything else?
That's it for me.
Okay, very good. Department reports, anybody, anyone?
Well, two quick things. One is just reminder for next week, we will have the work session
Mhm.
and we do have quite a bit of business to discuss. So it might be a marathon. And the other one is that I will be out on Friday from noon on. Our youngest is graduating.
Congrats.
Empty nesting.
Ooh.
And then I just have a couple quick updates. The council may recall that we had submitted a application through the Transportation Alternatives Program for some sidewalk infill, a sidewalk along Second Avenue and a couple along College. We fell 2 points short of that, so we did not get the funding on that. And then also, council may see some activity. Actually, it started today out at the industrial park area. Great River Energy has a power line overhead that runs in the rear of the lots, like by Precise Heating, Promotional Resources. That line is being removed and that work did start today. So when I drove by it, that line was gone. The poles are there, but poles will be gone shortly too. So.
Thanks, Nick. Right, anything?
Picnic tables are out for the summer. We're started hydrant flushing today, so we will continue that for the rest of the week. Probably see some action going on down at our south lift station. We're pouring new concrete around that. Was all just busted up. It's overdue. And lastly is the hanging baskets will go up Thursday.
Very good.
That's all I have.
Thanks, Ryan. Dwight, anything?
Students graduated and everybody's taking a vacation.
Do you know, are we gonna have a meeting in June to follow up on anything?
Yes.
Are we?
Yep.
Okay, very good. So I only have really one report, and counselors, you can chime in, but the chaotic session at the end of legislative session means there's no bonding bill, there's no 5.7 million for water sewer main extension. The bonding bill didn't even get a cash bill out of the Democratic's hands. I don't know that they're gonna call a special session or anything, but no infrastructure projects, no maintenance projects. It was Republicans against Democrats, and it was really bad. And Darren Lee reached out to us to say how bad it was, but I don't suspect it's gonna get anything more done, no special sessions or anything like that. So that's all I have to say. Any counselors got anything? Yeah, Bob.
Yeah, I just, are there any developmental agreements with the House of Hearn and the wedding venue? Oh,
Yeah, I can respond to that. So the wedding event venue would have to come back to execute the developers agreement. They are aware of that and have been aware of that and have paused the project for right now.
okay,
The CUP for that expires in early September. So regardless, they would have to either proceed ahead or request an extension, or if it expires, they'd have to go through that process again. The House of Hearn, no. So where they're at with that is we're just awaiting civil submittals for that project and go through the remaining site plan review process.
okay.
Yep.
Anybody else? Questions, concerns? Very good. Pursuant to Minnesota State Statute 13D05 subdivision 3A, the city will now enter in closed session to conduct performance review of city administrator David Murphy.
To adjourn?
Motion and second to adjourn. All those in favor signify by aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you all very much.
So, Saturday, 55.
Oh.
Going skydiving?
No.